Thanks for attending the Portland State University 2020 Thesis Symposium. I'm Jannike Allen, and today I'll be sharing a bit about my honors thesis, Post-Fire Changes in Interior Alaska's Vegetation Composition. My advisor is Dr. Melissa Lukash of the Geography Department. Interior Alaska is covered in boreal forest, a biome that harbors vast amounts of carbon. The most plentiful tree species is black spruce, though deciduous hardwoods and other conifers are found in this region as well. Like other northern latitude locations, interior Alaska is experiencing rapid global warming, about 2 times the rate experienced in continental United States. The region has historically experienced a fire frequency of roughly 100 years between burns. However, that is changing due to global warming. Reburns, or fires that burn in the same location within 50 years, have begun occurring, raising questions about what that means for the ecosystem. My research this past year has aimed to investigate how vegetation composition varies with time since fire, reburns, and topographic conditions at the landscape level in interior Alaska's boreal forests. This photo on the left depicts a dense black spruce site that has not been burned since before fire records began in 1940. On the right side is a site that has burned 3 times within 50 years and has a vegetation composition of willow and aspen, which are both deciduous hardwoods. The data used in my research comes from a program called Forest Inventory Analysis, which the U.S. Forest Service extended into interior Alaska in 2014, starting with the Tanana region. Over 700 permanent plots were established, which will allow for sampling again in the future, thus creating long-term data. I studied plot data from that first round of sampling and created an R script to examine relationships between tree species, tree stem density, and above-ground biomass per unit area. With help from the Lukash lab, it was possible to associate plots with their fire histories and topography. The Tanana region FIA plots, depicted here as circles, have fire histories of 0 to 3 burns in the 76 years prior to sampling, which is the extent of our fire records. Now I'm going to share with you a few of the results I obtained during my research. One way I examined the data was by forest type, where I categorized the tree species as either coniferous or hardwood. An overall trend I saw was that hardwoods had more biomass than conifers, see graph on the left, and conifers had higher stem density, see graph on the right. On the left, white spruce, in teal, stood out from the other conifers, having a higher biomass, more comparable to hardwoods. And on the right, black spruce, in green, was the main driver that caused conifers to appear to have higher stem density. For the following graphs, biomass in grams per meter squared will continue to be on the left, and stem density, in number of stems per hectare, will continue to be on the right. Addressing the question, how does biomass and stem density vary over time between forest types, I graphed average above-ground biomass and stem density at plots categorized as 0 to 25 years since fire, 26 to 50, and 51 to 75 years since fire. The FIA data shows that hardwoods grew much faster than conifers, reaching higher biomass within the 75 years plotted. Conifers, driven by black spruce, increased their stem densities over time. Trends in above-ground biomass show that hardwoods have high carbon storage potential. For some hardwood species, this carbon storage potential may be greatest during the middle of their lifespans. For example, one of the hardwood tree species present in interior Alaska, balsam poplar, shown in brown, had a peak in biomass 26 to 50 years after fire, and then declined. Thinning of hardwoods was also noted, shown in paper birch, in yellow, and balsam poplar, in brown, since their stem densities peak and then reduce. Since black spruce have such high stem densities and hardwoods reduce their stem densities as they age through self-thinning, stem density is a trait that differentiates species. Addressing the question, how does biomass and stem density vary between forest type and number of reburns, I graphed average above-ground biomass and stem density at plots with 0, 1, or 2 burns. It appears that conifer biomass and stem density were relatively consistent, whether the plots they are located at have burned once or twice. Hardwood biomass and stem density were also relatively consistent across burn numbers. Forest type does a poor job at differentiating between vegetation differences at once burned versus twice burned sites. Looking at individual species, it was possible to get further insights. We expected black spruce biomass to decline with increased number of burns, which it seems to slightly do, seen in green. White spruce biomass did not seem affected by an increase in burns, seen in teal. Quaking aspen biomass, in gray, decreased, and balsam poplar, in brown, was not present at twice burned sites. Tamarack, in blue, a less common conifer, slightly decreased in stem density with an increase in burns. It is clear from this analysis that reburns affect vegetation composition, and this will likely be more drastically apparent as climate conditions continue to favor more frequent burning. Another variable I analyzed was uplands and wetlands. Due to more moisture, I expected wetlands to burn less than uplands. Surprisingly, the percentage of plots that had 0, 1, or 2 fires were very comparable in wetlands versus uplands, making it seem that the likelihood of a fire occurring in either may be equal. This may be because black spruce grow well in moist conditions, yet are more flammable than hardwoods, perhaps thus counteracting the fire retardant properties of moisture. Topography does influence how fire occurs on the landscape, however, which is supported by this graph I made during my exploratory phase. How frequently fire occurred on a plot greatly varied with aspect, or the direction the slope faces. Location on the landscape can impact how fire behaves, including how frequently fire occurs there. Vegetation changes due to shifts in the fire regime are not going to be the same at every location on the landscape, but it helps to have a broad view of what trends are occurring at the landscape level. Although this initial study doesn't tell the whole story, we can see that trends don't always go the way we expect them to, and change is evident. It's been a privilege to work in the Lukash Lab, helping to analyze data that is rich in potential to aid our understanding of the boreal, a biome that is incredibly important to climate change due to its roles in the carbon cycle. Thanks for attending. Please let me know if you have questions.